Very much. I'm grateful to the International House, the Japan Foundation, and the ALFP program. I should mention that as a 38-year, poorly paid journalist surviving on fellowships for many decades, this was right up at the top. The ALFP fellowship, along with one other, was the best I ever did. It really benefited me, and well, I'm delighted that you called me back to speak here. The last time I was here was 2006, where also we had a conference. I said then that the number one problem in the world, not just in India, was the obnoxious growth of gross, dehumanizing inequality. And 13 years later, the bad news is that it's still growing. And well, it could be peaking because there is resistance and protest worldwide over that, but that's how it is. When Chito spoke about the retreat of freedom and democracy, I'm going to try, and Saree also followed up on that, I'm going to try placing the economic context of that, where freedom retreats, why democracy fails. Take the kind, when we're talking about inequality, take India. In 1991, and I prefer using the word inequality to disparities, I think it's a much more upfront, unapologetic term. In 1991, India did not have a single dollar billionaire. By dollar billionaire, we mean those who have who are billionaires in dollar currency. In 1991, India did not have a single dollar billionaire. Then we embraced the brave new world of neoliberalism and came out with all those policies which were supposed to generate wealth, and the wealth would trickle down and everybody would live happily ever after. 9 years later, in the year 2000, Forbes magazine, the oracle of the capitalist world, listed India as having 9 dollar billionaires. In 2012, the number was 53. Last year, 2018, India had 121 dollar billionaires, 3.5 times the number that Japan has. Our dads are richer than your dads. Okay? So you have 36, by the way, when I last looked, and we have, so about, what, something like 3.25 times, 3.5 times more. Now, our 121 billionaires are also special. Every one of them is. They're more special in another way. Their wealth, if you look at the Forbes numbers, is equivalent. These 100, what's our population? 1.3 billion. And these 121 individuals, their wealth is equivalent to 22% of our gross domestic product. Okay? More than a fifth of our GDP is the wealth of 121 individuals in a population of 1.3 billion. One individual in that, Mr. Mukesh Ambani, one of the richest people on the planet, he accounted for, he was in 12 months on the Forbes list. If you compare 2017 and 2018, in 12 months, Mr. Ambani added $16.9 billion to his existing wealth of $23 billion. Now, $16.9 billion in 12 months, imagine how hard he must have worked. Well, actually, I guess he didn't have to work so hard because subtle changes in economic policy favoring his telecom company made all the difference and has placed all his rivals in bankruptcy. But, or facing bankruptcy, if not there already. But I was very keen, given the promise of free market capitalism, that hard work, and you can also do it. So I conducted an experiment to find out if I could also do it. Or the average Indian, which is a laborer, the best a laborer would earn in India would be on the National Rural Employment Gap Scheme. I mean, the rural laborer. And I found to my surprise that he could also earn $16.9 billion. It would take him 187,000 years, but life expectancy is growing worldwide. So, it can always be, who knows? Either that, or it would take 18.7 million laborers to work 365 days a year for a year without any holidays or days off to earn that amount in 12 months. Now, like Saree, I also draw from the Credit Suisse Global Data Handbook, but the 2018 Indian figures are rather questionable because for the last 3-4 years, all our data is questionable. We've been working at degrading our data for about 20 years, but it's got accelerated in the last few. But the top 1% of the population that held 54.8% of total household wealth, most of that is held within the top 0.1%. And more importantly, if you look at the same Credit Suisse data for that year 2016-17, what's happening to the bottom 10%? In 2016, the bottom 10%, its share of the total household wealth was 0.1%. In 2017, it became minus 0.7%, which meant that the growth of debt amongst those whose assets were already vastly outstripped by their liabilities. Okay? So minus 0. So it's not as if the cake was getting bigger and everybody was doing better. It's that there was a serious and significant transfer of wealth from bottom to top. Now this shows in various ways, in gross and obscene ways, and I want to show you a few photographs which will give you, now I live in Mumbai, though I'm a rural reporter and I travel most of the year in the countryside, about 270 days a year for the last 25. But in my own city and in a state which claims to be having a gigantic drought, it's true, we are having a horrible drought running for 3 out of 5 years. In that, can you go back to the previous one, the first one? Okay, yeah, we are getting multi-storied buildings with a swimming pool on every floor. Now these are not ordinary buildings, these are buildings that are not only luxury buildings, but buildings of 37, 40 and even 40 floors. When it's completed, this project called Aquaria Grande in Borivali, Mumbai, the first 10 floors are all, parking, because now mandatorily every family has to have about 3 cars. And if you look at that, there are 37 floors in either tower and a builder's penthouse on the top. So there are 75 balcony swimming pools on one side of this edifice. And there are many such buildings coming up. Not all are 75 floors, but there are many more of those coming up. And this, if you like, is, by the way, this was designed by a Hong Kong-based architect. And that's how it should look at night in the artist's vision or nightmare, if you wish. Yeah. And in my own hometown of, well, many are coming up. It's absolutely gross and obscene, but it's growing. And in my own hometown of Chennai, we are more cultured and refined people, unlike Mumbai. So we are more tasteful, and therefore we have one only every 3rd floor. If you drive from Mumbai to Pune, it's a 2.5-hour drive between the two cities, on the highway, you will run into at least 200 giant hoardings advertising villas, multi-story buildings, each with its own private swimming pool, in a state that is having its greatest drought in 70 years. And this is my favorite. These guys are very unsporting. When I write about it, they remove the board. Luxury homes with an attached forest reserve. Damn it, in Maharashtra, even the Port Tiger doesn't have a forest reserve. But the builders do. Not 2-3 kilometers from this hoarding are how poor Indians collect their water. Yeah. Hundreds of meters of stationed buckets and pots waiting for the public taps to fill. Now the same lady, they put numbers on their thing, the same lady will go to 6-7 different public taps where also she has kept her pot and her bucket in the line, and this is what they do. Now the very interesting thing about the swimming pools is, if you're the kind of journalist I am, you don't interview the builder and write about the fashionable things that are happening. If you're the kind of reporter I am, you interview the construction workers on that project. So I interviewed the construction workers on many such projects, asked them, who are you, what are you doing here in the city, building swimming pools? They said, sir, we are farmers, small farmers, marginal farmers, we are agricultural laborers. Yeah, so what the hell are you doing here? Why aren't you on your farms? They say, where's the water? They've left their agriculture, they've left their fields fallow because they have no water and have come to the cities to build our swimming pools. Thank you. I mean, you can put out the light there. But that's how it. So that's how it's working. And this is our brave new world of greed is good and wealth is to be flaunted. We had the chief economic advisor to the government of India in 2016 state on television that there was nothing wrong in flaunting one's wealth. After all, one worked so hard to earn it. So yeah, 20 years ago, a chief economic advisor saying that in the country would have lost his job. He'd be looking at the ads the next morning. But the growth of this kind of inequality is not restricted to India. As the Oxfam inequality report, World Inequality Report shows you, as Credit Suisse shows you, 82% of wealth generated in the world in 2017 went to the top 1% of the global population. The bottom half, some 3.75 billion human beings, saw no addition to their wealth. If you, Oxfam also in the last 2 years, there's been a new billionaire born. A new billionaire comes into being every 48 hours. Credit Suisse's data shows us that 42 people, 42 individuals in this planet now own the same wealth as the poorest half of the planet, of humanity. The richest 1% of the globe earn more than the rest of humanity put together. That number, by the way, was once 352 in the UN Human Development Report of around 2009 or 10. It's come down from there to 42. 42 individuals. In 5 to 10 years, it will be 5 or 6 individuals. You really need to think whether this is acceptable, whether what it's going to do to us. One of the, I mentioned in a fit of nationalistic pride that we have 121 billionaires while Japan has a mere 36. But look at the other side of it. In the Human Development Index of the United Nations, Japan ranks 19. It's in the top 20. And India? We are 4th in the world, way above Japan in the list of dollar billionaires. In the Human Development Index, we rank 130. below Botswana, below a lot of countries you would think are much poorer. In the Human Development Index, we do that. And even our improvement in the Human Development Index, we reached a point of 0.640, which is an improvement. But if you adjust that for inequality, which the HDI does, it collapses by about 27%. Now you look at the wealth of the billionaires on the one hand. What do rural Indians earn? I'm a rural reporter, so better. I've shown you what the rich do. What do rural Indians earn? There are 179 million rural households. Typically, a household has about 5 people in India. 75% of these households, according to the government's data of the socio-economic caste census, 75% of households, the main breadwinner takes home less than 5,000 rupees, which is less than 7,800 yen a month. The main breadwinner in 75% of our rural households takes home less than 7,800 yen per month. In 90% of the households, the main breadwinner takes home less than 10,000 rupees or 15,500 yen a month. Okay. In just 8% of rural households, the main breadwinner takes home more than 10,000 rupees a month. In farm households, everyone today knows, after a lot of us broke our heads on reporting it for 15 years, that India has something called an agrarian crisis. It's not just India. You also have a crisis of the rural. You also have a crisis in farming. This country, Japan, had 11 to 12 million farmers in 1965. You have less than 2 million today. What a drop. Okay? And it's become so unviable because again the concentration pattern means that more and more corporate control over agriculture is exercised all over the world. What do farming households earn in India? Again, the data are outdated because the government, the present government, has not cared to generate new data on the subject. But the last National Sample Survey Organization study, 5-year quinennial survey, tells us the average household income, not individual, household, 5 people put together, average household income of the Indian farmer is 6,426 rupees or 9,960 yen, which means the per capita income is less than 2,000 yen per month. And in that situation, where this crisis was not natural and poverty is not a disease, it was achieved by economic policy. It was brought about by a devastating set of policies that were unleashed all across the world and not just in India. But the impact in poorer countries was obviously greater in countries with large populations of poor people. Okay? So it was obviously much greater. That farming is in crisis. It took many years to convince the media that there was something called an agrarian crisis. And by the time they've come around to recognizing it, I believe that the agrarian crisis has gone far beyond the agrarian. It is now a societal crisis. It is a civilizational crisis as the largest body of small landowners in the world fight for their survival and livelihoods. It is, if you ask me, a crisis of our own humanity that we could sit back for 20 years during which 310,000 farmers committed suicide, according to the Government of India's figures in what is called the National Crime Records Bureau. 310,000 farmers is a gross underestimate. I'm the guy who broke the story, by the way, so I can tell you that. But even Even if you accept it as an accurate figure, it's a hideous, horrendous figure. 310,000. It means that between 2001 and 2011, for example, one farmer was killing himself or herself every 32 minutes. I have been asking myself, wherever I go, where is our moral outrage? Where is our outrage? How can we just watch this? Okay? Inequality breeds its own mindset. Those who are suffering it are no longer human to us. If I earn 1,000,000 times what you do, there's no way I'm going to treat you as equal, my friend. Forget it. Okay? That kind of gross inequality has gripped the planet, and it will rip the planet as well. So you need to, the farming was destroyed by a series of policies. One, of course, we transferred great power to corporations. And in your inequality battle, assuming that you want to fight inequality, your battle is going to be against corporate power. If you cannot tame corporate power, you cannot bridge any of these disparities or inequalities. Forget it. Okay? Of the 100 largest entities in the world in economic value, more than half are corporations. More than half, the first 100 are corporations. Then come within only after the 50 or so many other nations come in, except the top 3-4 economies in the world. Okay? You cannot bridge these disparities if you do not privilege. If you privilege profits over people, corporations over communities, you cannot succeed. From the 1990s, we unleashed a set of policies, which one was called market-based pricing, which allowed corporations to indulge in price gouging. The cost of every input, seeds, where one company controlled 30% of the world's seeds, okay? The cost of seed went up several 100%. The cost of fertilizer went up several 100%. A bag of diammonium phosphate, 50 kilograms in 1991 was 152 rupees. It's 1,450 rupees today. Okay? Now, and in fact, they've upped the rate but lowered the weight. It's no longer 50 kgs, it's 45 kilograms. Every single input went up. So the cost of cultivation to the farmer went up several 100%, but the farmer's income didn't raise much, did not go up much. Second, at the very time that you unleashed free market prices, it's all nonsense, there's no such thing as a free market. If anyone still believes in it, I mean, it's right up there with, Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy. But you have, in the same period, what was the credit that was given to agriculture, to farmers, direct financing, moved away from agriculturists to agribusiness. For years, the media have been lecturing us in the editorials and in their magazines and in television. These farmers are lazy guys, they get drunk, they write articles on, how what wastrels these farmers are. They're threatening the health of the banking system because they don't repay their loans. We took away their credit. They went into greater distress by taking loans from private money lenders. They are unable to repay either the banks or the money lenders, and that is one of the driving factors of the suicides. Okay? However, please understand this. The data, official data shows us that all the bank unpaid farmers' loans put together are less than half the bad loans of the top 12 corporations in the country. Okay? Nobody says, oh, they're lazy guys, stop giving them money. The top 12 corporations have non-performing assets that are more than twice what tens of millions of farmers owe. We just decided that we are going to be a corporate state, we're going to move to corporate agriculture, and so population of farmers between the 1991 census and the 2011 census fell by 15 million. That means almost 2,000 people were losing the status of farmers every 24 hours in that 20-year period. We don't know what has happened since 2011. The next census is 21. So the other thing that's devastating the farmers is the great market, futures trading, the forward trading, futures. So extremely volatile, extreme volatility in prices, especially in cash crops, where 6 or 7 corporations worldwide set the game, set the price, set the agenda. There's an employment crisis. Where did those 15 million people who dropped out of being full status farmers go? Most of them became agricultural laborers. They've fallen into the ranks of the agrarian underclass. You have an employment crisis, you have every sort of crisis that you can think of, a mega water crisis, and we're trying to privatize water. And we've had giant migrations, which put pressure on every level of society. Finally, what are the sort of things that you can do about this? As I maintain that what happened in India is neither unique or peculiar to India. It's a worldwide phenomenon. In different countries, it has a different impact. The rate of farmer suicides in Midwest United States is very, very high. I don't think it's low in Japan. If someone did the math on it. Taming of corporate power. And are there some things that we can agree on? There already is something that you can agree on. To look at the policy frameworks that Saree spoke about, to look at the political framework that Chito spoke about. And it's a particular document of the United Nations in which we have selectively focused on 2 or 3 clauses and ignored many others. It's called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, every one of us is familiar with Article 19. It has been taboo to speak of Article 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. Those are the invisible clauses of the Human Rights Declaration. What are those? The right to work, the right to a decent wage, the right to join and organize a trade union, the right to collective bargaining, the right to health, the right to free education. All these are there from clause 23 to 28, which are virtually expunged in political discourse across the world. So it's not as if there is nothing to go back to. It's not as if there is no basis for the kind of policy frameworks that the 3 of us have been speaking about. I think that it's never been easy. It has been done. It won't be easy. It can be done. And the plus point is that all over the world, people are out protesting. Now that's going in different ways. In one case, in protesting against what neoliberalism has done to them and their sickness with an elite, people have ended up voting for the extreme versions of the same sickness. But on the other, people are out on the streets. For me, it's a positive thing when demoralization leads to suicides. Active protest leads to assertion of your rights. And I think that's beginning to happen all over the world. There has my favorite Victor Hugo saying, there is no army, on earth more mighty than an idea whose time has come. I think that time has come, and the idea is justice, social, political, economic, environmental, cultural, and gender. Thank you.